All right, so you want to dive into existentialism.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. You sent over this YouTube video. It's called Creating Your Own Purpose. It's from the Success Chasers channel.
Okay.
And you're really interested in getting a solid grasp of this whole existentialism thing.
Right.
So we're going to unpack the ideas from that video and really explore what it all means.
Sounds good.
And it's a rich philosophy, and as we'll see, it asks some pretty big questions.
Yeah, for sure.
About meaning, freedom, and responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, does the universe have some kind of built-in purpose?
Right.
Or are we really just making it all up as we go along? I mean, that's a pretty mind-blowing thought, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's really the core question at the heart of existentialism.
So how do we even begin to unpack something like that? Where do we start?
Well, the video touches on the historical context, and that's a great starting point.
Okay.
Existentialism really gained momentum in the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly in the wake of World War II.
That makes sense. I mean, after experiencing something as horrific as a world war, it's natural to question everything you thought you knew about the world.
Exactly. Events like World War II, the rise of totalitarian regimes, and the looming threat of nuclear war, really shook people's faith in traditional systems of meaning.
Okay, so during times of immense uncertainty and upheaval, people start searching for answers in new places.
Right,
Yes.
precisely. And that's where figures like Søren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche come in.
Okay.
They were some of the early thinkers who wrestled with these ideas.
The video mentions that Kierkegaard was all about subjective truth and individual experience.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
He believed that truth, especially when it comes to things like ethics and religion, is deeply personal.
Okay.
It's not something that can be dictated by external authorities. It's about what resonates with you on a deeply individual level.
So kind of like your truth might be different from my truth, and that's okay.
In a way, yes. Kierkegaard emphasized that individual experience and subjective interpretation are fundamental to understanding the world and our place.
And what about Nietzsche?
Yeah.
He seemed like a bit of a rebel, challenging all sorts of conventional wisdom.
He definitely was. Nietzsche was a fierce critic of societal values, especially those that he saw as stifling individual creativity and authenticity.
Yeah.
He believed that individuals should create their own values rather than blindly accepting those imposed by society.
That's a pretty radical idea, especially back then.
It was, and his work still resonates with a lot of people today.
Yeah.
He championed the idea of the Übermensch, the individual who transcends societal norms and creates their own meaning and purpose.
I'm starting to see how these early thinkers laid the groundwork for what became existentialism.
Yeah.
They were asking some really tough questions about meaning, freedom, and the individual's place in the world.
Absolutely. And their influence can be seen in the work of later existentialist thinkers like Sartre and Camus, who we'll get to in a moment.
Now, you mentioned literature and art as influences on existentialism.
Right. Think about writers like Dostoevsky, Kafka, and Beckett.
Okay.
Their works are filled with themes of despair, absurdity, and the search for meaning in a seemingly meaningless world.
Yeah, their books definitely don't shy away from the dark side of the human experience.
Exactly. And that rawness, that willingness to grapple with the difficult questions really resonated with the existentialist movement.
Now let's talk about Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most famous figures associated with existentialism.
Okay.
What I find fascinating about Sartre is how his life experiences shaped his philosophical ideas.
Right.
He was captured by the Germans during World War II,
Yes.
and that experience had a profound impact on his thinking about freedom and responsibility.
It did.
Being a prisoner of war must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how that would make you question everything.
It certainly did for Sartre. He developed his famous concept of existence precedes essence.
Okay.
In other words, we're not born with some predetermined purpose or blueprint.
So it's like we're born as blank slates, and it's up to us to decide who we are and what our lives will mean.
Exactly. Sartre believed that through our actions, through the choices we make, we create our essence, our being.
So that sounds like a lot of freedom, but also a lot of responsibility.
That's precisely the point. Sartre called it radical freedom. We have the absolute freedom to choose, but that freedom also means we're fully responsible for the consequences of our choices.
Wow, no pressure, right?
And we can feel that way sometimes. But Sartre also warned against what he called bad faith.
Okay.
It's when we pretend we're not free, when we blame external factors for our situation instead of owning our choice.
Have you ever caught yourself doing that? I know I have. Sometimes it's easier to blame circumstances than to admit that we had a hand in creating them.
Absolutely. It's a common human tendency.
Yeah.
But Sartre believed that true authenticity comes from acknowledging our freedom and taking responsibility for our actions.
Now, Sartre also wrote this massive, dense philosophical work called Being and Nothingness, right?
He did. It's one of his most important works, and it delves deep into the nature of consciousness and existence.
I have to admit, I've tried reading it, and it's pretty heavy stuff.
It's definitely not a light beach read, but one of the key ideas in Being and Nothingness is the concept of consciousness as nothingness.
Okay, that sounds a bit paradoxical. How can consciousness be nothingness?
Sartre believed that consciousness is not a thing, like a physical object.
Okay.
It's more like a void and emptiness that allows us to be aware of ourselves and the world around us.
Okay.
It's this nothingness that gives us the freedom to question, imagine, and transcend our current situation.
So it's like consciousness is the space where freedom exists.
That's a great way to put it. It's the space where we can detach from our immediate circumstances and consider different possibilities.
Now, Sartre also had this interesting idea about the look and the idea that hell is other people.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's a complex concept, but essentially it's about how the awareness of others' perception can limit our freedom.
So we become self-conscious, worried about how others see us, and that can prevent us from being truly authentic.
Yes, that's part of it. When we become aware of being observed, we can start to conform to the expectations of others, even if those expectations don't align with our true selves.
That makes sense. It's like we're constantly negotiating between our own desires and the expectations of the world around us.
Precisely. And Sartre believed that this constant negotiation can be a source of anxiety and even anguish, but it's also part of the human condition, part of what it means to exist in the world.
Yeah, definitely food for thought there.
Definitely.
So we've been talking about how other people's perceptions can, make us feel boxed in, almost like we're living someone else's idea of who we should be.
That's right. Sartre felt this pressure acutely and saw it as a real struggle for authenticity.
But I'm curious, how does all this philosophical pondering about freedom and the look actually play out in real life? It seems pretty abstract.
Let's think about Sartre's own life. He wasn't just an armchair philosopher. He was deeply engaged in social and political activism, even advocating for armed revolution at times.
Yeah, that's right. He was known for walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. For Sartre, philosophy wasn't just an intellectual exercise.
Right.
He believed it should lead to action, to making a real difference in the world.
So he saw a direct link between understanding our own freedom and using that freedom to fight for a better, more just world.
Absolutely. He believed that recognizing our own freedom meant recognizing the freedom of others and working to create a society where everyone has the opportunity to live authentically.
That's a powerful idea, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of Sartre's specific works.
Okay.
The video mentions Being and Nothingness and Nausea.
Right.
I'm wondering if you can give us some key insights from those books.
Sure. Being and Nothingness is a challenging read, but it's full of brilliant insights about the nature of consciousness and existence. One of the key takeaways is his distinction between two types of being. He calls them being in itself and being for itself.
I remember those terms from trying to read the book, but they kind of went over my head. Can you break it down for us?
Of course, being in itself refers to objects they just are. They exist without questioning or reflecting. Think of a rock or a tree. They simply exist in themselves. But being for itself is different. It refers to conscious beings like human. We have the ability to reflect on ourselves and the world around us. We can question our existence, imagine possibilities, and make choices.
So being for itself is all about consciousness and freedom, while being in itself is just about existing without all that extra baggage.
Exactly. And for Sartre, this ability to question and imagine is what makes us truly free.
I'm starting to see how this connects to his idea of existence precedes essence.
Right.
We're not just objects defined by our physical properties or predetermined roles.
Yeah.
We have the potential to become something more through our choices and action.
Right. And there's this great quote from Being and Nothingness where Sartre says, "Man is not the sum of what he has, but the totality of what he does not yet have, of what he could have."
I love that it's so optimistic, suggesting that we're always evolving, it's like we're constantly writing our own story.
Exactly. Now let's talk about Nausea, Sartre's first novel.
Okay.
Fascinating exploration of existential angst and the search for meaning.
I've heard of Nausea, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. What's the basic premise?
Well, the main character, Antoine Roquentin, is a historian who suddenly becomes overwhelmed by this intense feeling of nausea, a sense of the absurdity and meaninglessness of existence.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of existential dread, that sense that everything is kind of pointless.
It's a pretty universal human experience.
Yeah.
And Sartre captures it brilliantly in Nausea. There's this scene where Roquentin is looking at a tree root and he's just overcome by this feeling of revulsion and nausea. He realizes the root just is. It exists without reason or purpose, and that realization fills him with a sense of dread.
That's a pretty intense image. It's like he's suddenly seeing the world without the usual filters, without the comforting illusions of meaning and purpose.
Exactly. He's stripped bare force to confront the raw, absurd reality of existence. And it's deeply unsettling. But here's the thing, and this is crucial to understanding existentialism. Even though Quentin experiences this profound nausea, even though he feels the weight of the absurd, he ultimately finds a kind of liberation in it.
So it's not just about wallowing in despair. There's something more to it.
Right. There's this great quote where Roquetin says, "I am free. There is absolutely no more reason for living. All the ones I've tried have given way, and I can't imagine more of them. I have to build them myself."
That's powerful. So even in the face of absurdity, we still have the freedom, the responsibility to create our own meaning.
Yes, and that's a key takeaway from nausea. Facing the absurdity of existence doesn't have to lead to nihilism or despair. It can actually be empowering, because it forces us to take ownership of our life and create our own values and purpose.
Now, the video you sent also mentions Albert Camus, another prominent existentialist thinker.
Right. While Sartre focused on radical freedom and the responsibility that comes with it, Camus took a slightly different approach, exploring the themes of absurdity and revolt.
What do you mean by revolt in this context? It sounds a bit dramatic.
It's not about taking up arms or starting a revolution, at least not in the literal sense for getting into play. Camus' revolt is about consciously choosing to live a full and meaningful life despite the absurdity of existence.
So it's more like an internal rebellion, a refusal to give in to despair or meaninglessness.
Exactly. It's about embracing life on our own terms, creating our own values, and finding joy in the present moment, even though we know it will all eventually end.
That reminds me of Camus' famous essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. In that essay, Camus uses the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was condemned to eternally roll a boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down again, as a metaphor for the human condition.
It's such a bleak image, this endless, pointless struggle.
It is. But here's where Camus takes an unexpected turn. He argues that we must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Wait, happy? How can someone condemned to such a meaningless task possibly be happy?
That's the paradox Camus wants us to grapple with. He suggests that even though Sisyphus's labor is absurd, even though it has no ultimate purpose or end, he can still find meaning in the struggle itself. He can find joy in the act of pushing the boulder, in the exertion of his will, in the simple act of being alive.
That's a really interesting interpretation. It's like saying that meaning doesn't come from some external source or preordained purpose.
Right.
It comes from within, from the choices we make and the actions.
Exactly. And that's the essence of Camus' philosophy of revolt. It's about defying the absurdity of existence by embracing life fully and finding joy in the struggle.
Now, I know Camus also wrote novels, and The Stranger is one that always comes to mind when thinking about existentialism.
Right. The Stranger is a powerful exploration of Camus' ideas about absurdity detached and the search for meaning. The main character, Mersault, is a fascinating and complex figure who lives a very detached, almost indifferent life.
The book really throws you for a loop because Mersault doesn't react the way we expect people to react in certain situations. Like when his mother dies, he doesn't show much emotion. It's almost as if he's numb to the world.
Exactly. And later, when he commits an act of violence, there's still this sense of detachment, this lack of emotional engagement that makes us question his motivations and his entire outlook on life.
It's a challenging book because it forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about morality, justice, and the meaning of life.
It definitely does. And one of the key takeaways for me, at least, is that Mersault, in his own way, embodies Camus' idea of revolt. He refuses to play by society's rules, to conform to expectations, or to pretend to feel emotions he doesn't actually experience.
So in a way, his detachment is his form of rebellion.
Yes, exactly. He's a rebellion against the hypocrisy and the artificiality of the world around him by simply being true to himself, even if that means appearing strange or even heartless to others.
Now, towards the end of the book, Mersault is facing execution for his crime. And there's this really powerful scene where he seems to find a kind of peace or acceptance in the face of death. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. It's a complex scene and it's open to interpretation, but I think it reflects Camus' belief that acknowledging the absurdity of existence can actually be liberating facing his own mortality. Mersault seems to let go of any illusions about meaning or purpose and simply embraces the present moment.
It's like he's finally free from the weight of expectations and societal justice.
Exactly. And there's this line where Mersault says, "I'd lived my life one way and I could just as well have lived it another." And so it really encapsulates his sense of the arbitrary nature of life choices.
And right before his execution, he makes a really strange request.
Yes. He wishes for a large crowd to be present at his execution, greeting him with cries of hate.
It's such a jarring statement. What do you make of it?
I think it's a final act of defiance, a refusal to conform. Even in the face of death, he's saying, in essence, I'm going to live and die on my own terms.
It's a powerful ending that really stays with you. It makes you think about your own choices and how you want to live your life.
Exactly. Both The Stranger and The Myth of Sisyphus offer profound insights into Camus's philosophy of revolt, urging us to embrace the absurd, find joy in the struggle, and live authentically, even if it means defying societal norms.
So far, we've been exploring these existentialist ideas in a pretty abstract way, but I'm wondering, how do these ideas actually play out in our everyday lives? How can we apply these big concepts to our own personal struggles, decisions, and relationships?
That's a great question, and it's one that the video you sent really tries to address. Let's dive into that now.
You know how we've been talking about this whole idea of like revolt as a way to deal with the absurdity of life?
Yeah, Camus's concept of, consciously choosing to live a meaningful life despite the lack of inherent meaning.
Right. I get that in theory, but I'm wondering how that actually translates into actual everyday life.
Right.
The video you shared, Creating Your Own Purpose, seems to offer some practical advice on that front.
It suggests that one way to embrace this, revolt is by taking ownership of how we define purpose and fulfillment.
That sounds interesting. I think a lot of us get caught up in chasing external markers of success or, waiting for some grand purpose to be revealed to us.
Yeah, and that's precisely what existentialism challenges. It doesn't offer a pre-packaged definition of purpose or a step-by-step guide to fulfillment.
So no magic formula for a meaningful life, then?
Not quite. Existentialism encourages us to embrace the ambiguity and the freedom that come with, creating our own meaning.
So it's more about the journey than finding a fixed destination.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that purpose isn't something static or preordained. It's something we actively construct through our choices and actions.
So it's constantly evolving as we grow and change.
Precisely. And that's both exciting and daunting because it puts the responsibility squarely on us. It's up to us to decide what matters, what we value, and what we want to contribute to the world.
That makes me think of Sartre's famous line, "We are our choice." It's like we're constantly shaping our own purpose with every decision we make.
Absolutely. And it's not just about our big life choices like careers or relationships. Even the seemingly small, everyday choices we make contribute to the kind of purpose we create for ourselves.
So it's about being intentional and mindful in all aspects of our lives.
Exactly. And this connects to the idea of fulfillment. Existentialism emphasizes that fulfillment isn't about achieving some external goal or reaching a certain level of success.
It's not about getting to the top of the mountain and finally feeling content.
Not necessarily. It's more about finding joy and satisfaction in the process itself, in the daily experiences and interactions that make up our lives.
So it's about savoring those moments of connection, creativity, and learning that occur along the way.
Yes, and it's about embracing the challenges and setbacks as opportunities for growth. Life isn't always easy or pleasant. There will be difficult times, disappointments, and failures.
That's for sure. But you're saying that those experiences, even the tough ones, can actually contribute to a sense of fulfillment.
It's Axterday. Existentialism reminds us that those experiences are also part of what makes life rich and meaningful.
It's about learning from our mistakes, growing from our challenges, and becoming more resilient in the face of adversity.
Right now, the video highlights that this sense of fulfillment can be found in many different areas of life. It could be through our work, our relationships, our hobbies, creative pursuits, or contributions to the community.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to finding purpose and fulfillment.
Not at all. The key is to find those things that genuinely resonate with us personally and pursue them with passion and intent.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values and living authentically, even if that looks different for everyone.
That's the heart of it. Now, I know we've covered a lot of theoretical ground, but the video also offers some practical strategies for cultivating a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. Can you share some of those strategies with us?
Of course, one of the suggestions is to engage in regular self-reflection.
So taking some time each day to kind of check in with ourselves, to think about what we're grateful for, what brings us joy, and what we want to accomplish.
Exactly. Journaling, meditation, or even just taking a quiet walk in nature can help create space for this kind of introspection.
It's about becoming more aware of our thoughts, feelings, and desires so that we can identify what truly matters to us.
Another strategy is to experiment with different activities and experiences. Step outside of your comfort zone and try something new, whether it's taking a class, learning a skill, volunteering for a cause you're passionate about.
I love that it's about being open to new possibilities and discovering hidden talents or passions that we might not even know we have.
Right. And finally, the video emphasizes the importance of connecting with others, building meaningful relationships with people who share our values and interests.
Yeah, that makes sense. Having a strong support system can make all the difference, especially when we're facing challenges or feeling lost.
It's about creating a sense of community and belonging, surrounding ourselves with people who inspire us to be our best self.
Well, it's been an incredible journey exploring these ideas. It seems like existentialism really offers like a unique and empowering perspective on purpose and fulfillment.
It does.
It challenges us to embrace the ambiguity of existence, to take ownership of our choices, and to find meaning in the midst of the absurd.
And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that we are the authors of our own stories. We have the power to shape our lives in a way that brings us joy, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose.
Well said. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
Likewise.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking your own unique path to purpose and fulfillment.